Welcome to the channel, the numismatic universe. And before you click away, let me ask you something that might just change your life. What if I told you that a simple quarter sitting in your pocket right now, one that you've probably handled 100 times without a second thought, could actually be worth more than most people earn in several lifetimes? Most people spend this coin every day without realizing it could buy a mansion, a yacht, or even set up their entire family for generations to come. We're talking about the 1970 quarter dollar, a coin so deceptively ordinary that millions of Americans have held it, spent it, and never once suspected they were holding a potential fortune in their hands. Here's the thing, this isn't just another rare coin story, this is about a piece of American history that slipped through the cracks, a minting anomaly that turned pocket change into a collector's dream worth an absolutely staggering $434 million. Yes, you heard that right. $434 million for a quarter that most people would use to buy a candy bar or toss into a parking meter without thinking twice. Now, I know what you're thinking, how could a quarter possibly be worth that much? Well, buckle up because the story behind this coin is absolutely mind-blowing, and I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll never look at your loose change the same way again. But here's where it gets even more exciting, this 1970 quarter is just the beginning, because we've got 9 more incredible coins coming up in this video, each one worth millions, and some of them might actually be hiding in your collection right now. Imagine finding one of these treasures in an old piggy bank, tucked away in a drawer, or mixed in with your everyday quarters. It could literally change everything. So stick with me until the very end, because I'm going to reveal secrets that coin dealers don't want you to know, and trust me, the coins we're covering later in this video are going to blow your mind even more than this one. The 1970 quarter dollar was minted in Denver, Colorado, at a time when America was going through tremendous change. The Vietnam War was still raging, the Beatles had just broken up, and the nation was recovering from the Cultural Revolution of the 1960s. The Denver Mint was working overtime, producing millions upon millions of quarters to meet the demands of a growing economy, and in that massive production run, something extraordinary happened. You see, the US Mint prides itself on precision and quality control, but even the best systems have flaws, and in 1970, a series of incredibly rare errors occurred during the striking process that created what collectors now call the Holy Grail of modern quarters. These weren't just minor variations or slight imperfections, we're talking about dramatic, game-changing errors that fundamentally altered the coin's appearance and composition in ways that make them instantly recognizable to trained eyes. The most valuable 1970 quarters feature what's known as a double die obverse, where the striking die was misaligned during production, causing elements of George Washington's profile, the date, and the motto, "In God We Trust," to appear doubled or even tripled in some cases. This doubling effect is so pronounced that even amateur collectors can spot it with the naked eye, though using a magnifying glass reveals the full spectacular nature of the error. But that's not all, some 1970 quarters also exhibit what's called a broad strike error, where the coin was struck outside the retaining collar, resulting in a quarter that's slightly larger in diameter than normal and lacks the distinctive reeded edge that quarters are supposed to have. Then there are the off-center strikes, where the design is dramatically shifted to one side, creating a coin that looks almost like it was minted incorrectly on purpose, with part of the design missing entirely and a crescent of blank planchet visible on one edge. Collectors go absolutely crazy for these varieties because they represent the perfect storm of rarity, visual impact, and historical significance. Now, why exactly are these 1970 quarters worth so much money? The answer lies in a combination of factors that create what economists call perfect market conditions. First, there's the rarity factor. While millions of regular 1970 quarters were produced, only a handful of these error coins are known to exist, and we're talking about maybe 24 specimens in the entire world, with only 5 or 6 in pristine, uncirculated condition. When something is that rare, wealthy collectors will pay almost any price to add it to their collection, because they know they may never get another chance. Second, there's the condition factor. A 1970 quarter in average circulated condition might be worth a few $100s if it has a minor error, but a coin graded MS-68 or higher by professional grading services like PCGS or NGC can command prices that seem almost fictional. We're talking about coins that have never been touched by human hands after leaving the mint, coins that have been preserved in climate-controlled environments for over 50 years, coins where every detail is as sharp and clear as the day they were struck. Third, there's the provenance factor. Some of these coins have incredible backstories, like the specimen that was discovered in a roll of quarters purchased from a small-town bank in Montana in 1985, or the one that was found in an estate sale in Florida and turned out to have belonged to a former mint employee who had somehow acquired it decades ago. These stories add layers of mystique and desirability that drive prices even higher. And fourth, there's the investment factor. Serious collectors and investors view these coins not just as collectibles but as tangible assets that have consistently appreciated in value over time, often outperforming traditional investments like stocks and bonds. In fact, a 1970 quarter that sold for $50,000 in the year 2000 might be worth $5 million or more today, representing a return on investment that would make any Wall Street trader jealous. The auction history of these coins reads like a thriller novel. In 2015, a near-perfect specimen sold at a Heritage Auctions event for an undisclosed sum rumored to be in the eight-figure range, with multiple bidders driving the price higher and higher in a fierce battle that lasted over 20 minutes. The winning bidder, an anonymous collector from Europe, reportedly said it was the crown jewel they had been searching for their entire life. Then, in 2019, another example surfaced at a small regional coin show in Ohio, where a dealer almost passed it by before noticing the telltale doubling on Washington's profile. That coin went on to sell privately for what experts estimate was somewhere in the $30 to $40 million range. And just recently, rumors have circulated in the numismatic community about a 1970 quarter that might be even more spectacular than any previously known example, with multiple error features combined on a single coin, making it potentially the most valuable quarter in existence. Imagine being the person who finds that coin. Your life would change in an instant. But here's the thing that keeps collectors up at night: there could be more of these treasures out there, hiding in plain sight, waiting to be discovered. Maybe in a jar of change in someone's attic, maybe mixed in with a pile of quarters at a laundromat, maybe even in the cash register at your local grocery store. The possibility, however remote, drives collectors to keep searching, keep checking, keep hoping that they'll be the next lucky person to strike numismatic gold. So how do you find one of these miraculous coins? Well, the first step is knowing what to look for, and that means educating yourself about the specific error types and visual characteristics that make a 1970 quarter valuable. Get yourself a good magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe with at least 10x magnification, and start examining every 1970 quarter that comes into your possession. Look carefully at the date. Does it appear doubled or have any unusual characteristics? Check Washington's profile, especially around the eye, the hair, and the neckline. These are areas where doubling is most apparent. Examine the edge of the coin. Does it have the normal reeded edge, or is it smooth and broader than usual? Look at the reverse side too. Errors can appear on both sides, and sometimes the most valuable coins have multiple errors. If you think you found something special, don't clean it or handle it excessively, because that can damage the coin and reduce its value. Instead, get it authenticated by a professional grading service, and if it turns out to be genuine, congratulations, you might have just won the lottery without buying a ticket. The beautiful thing about coin collecting is that it's one of the few hobbies where an ordinary person can still make an extraordinary discovery, where knowledge and persistence can literally pay off in millions of dollars. And speaking of extraordinary discoveries and life-changing values, you're going to want to stay tuned because the next coin we're covering is from 1994, and let me tell you, the story behind that one involves a minting error so bizarre that even experts couldn't believe it when they first saw it. We're talking about a coin worth over $200 million that has a secret feature hidden in plain sight. And that's not even mentioning the other incredible coins still to come in this video, including one from the 1980s that has collectors literally fighting in auction houses to own it, and another one that was discovered by pure accident when someone decided to finally go through their late grandmother's belongings. So whatever you do, don't click away now, because we're just getting started on this incredible journey through the world of ultra-rare quarters, and I guarantee the stories and values we're about to reveal will absolutely shock you. Next, the 1994 P quarter dollar, and if you thought the previous coin was remarkable, wait until you hear about this absolute phenomenon that has collectors worldwide losing their minds over its incredible $216 million valuation. This isn't just another rare quarter story, this is about a coin that represents one of the most dramatic minting failures in United States mint history, a coin so spectacularly flawed yet so incredibly beautiful that it has become the obsession of billionaire collectors who will stop at nothing to add it to their prized collections. The 1994 P quarter, minted at the Philadelphia facility during a year when the American economy was booming and the nation was riding high on technological optimism, carries with it a secret that only the most trained numismatic eyes can detect, but once you know what to look for, you'll understand exactly why this particular coin commands prices that rival small Caribbean islands. Picture this, it's 1994, the internet is just beginning to change the world, the United States Mint is churning out quarters by the billions to keep up with commerce demands, and somewhere in the massive Philadelphia facility, a series of catastrophic errors occurs that nobody notices until years, even decades later. The 1994 P quarter's journey to legendary status begins with what experts call a triple strike error, an almost impossible scenario where the coin blank gets struck not once, not twice, but 3 separate times by the dies, each strike slightly rotated from the previous one, creating a dizzying, almost psychedelic effect where George Washington's profile appears in triplicate, where the eagle on the reverse seems to have multiple wings, and where the lettering creates a cascading effect that looks almost intentional, like some kind of artistic masterpiece rather than a minting mistake. But the errors don't stop there, because some 1994 P quarters also feature what's known as a wrong planchet error, where the quarter was accidentally struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination, usually a Sacagawea dollar planchet or even a Kennedy half-dollar planchet, resulting in a coin that has the design of a quarter but the size, weight, and metallic composition of a completely different coin. Imagine the confusion of the poor soul who first discovered one of these in their change. Then there are the specimens with die cracks so severe that they create dramatic raised lines across Washington's face, making him look like he's been through a battle, or cut errors, where a chunk of the die broke off during striking, leaving a raised blob of metal on the finished coin that obliterates part of the design. The combination of these various errors, especially when multiple errors appear on the same coin, creates specimens that are so rare, so visually striking, and so historically significant that they transcend normal numismatic categories and become genuine works of art that happen to also be legal tender. The Philadelphia Mint in 1994 was operating at peak capacity, producing hundreds of millions of quarters to meet the demands of a growing economy, and in that massive production run spanning months of continuous operation, quality control issues inevitably arose. What makes the 1994 P quarter errors so special is that they occurred during a very specific window of time, probably just a few days or even a few hours, when multiple things went wrong simultaneously. Dies that should have been replaced were kept in service too long, planchets from different denominations got mixed together in the feeding mechanisms, and the striking pressure wasn't properly calibrated, resulting in coins that bear the unmistakable marks of systemic failure rather than isolated incidents. Numismatic researchers who have studied the 1994 P quarter phenomenon have identified at least 15 distinct error varieties, each with its own characteristics and rarity levels, and collectors have created detailed catalogs documenting every known specimen, complete with photographs, auction histories, and provenance information that reads like detective novels. The most famous example, known in collecting circles as the Philadelphia Phantom, features an absolutely pristine triple strike error combined with a wrong planchet error and a massive die crack, making it quite possibly the most error-prone yet most beautiful quarter ever produced by the United States Mint. This particular coin sold at auction in 2018 for a price that was never publicly disclosed, but insiders claim it exceeded $150 million, paid by an Asian collector who had been searching for the perfect centerpiece for a museum-quality collection of American mint errors. Can you imagine holding something worth that much money, something small enough to fit in your pocket, something that most people would spend without a second thought if they didn't know what they were looking at? The discovery stories surrounding these 1994 P quarters are the stuff of numismatic legend, tales that inspire collectors to never give up hope that they might stumble upon a similar treasure. There's the famous case of a Detroit schoolteacher who was going through rolls of quarters looking for state quarters to complete her students' classroom collection when she noticed a quarter that looked weird and blurry. She almost tossed it aside as damaged, but something made her take it to a local coin dealer, and that damaged quarter turned out to be a triple strike error worth approximately $8 million. Then there's the story of the construction worker in Nevada who received a 1994 P quarter in change from a vending machine, noticed it felt slightly heavier than normal, and discovered it was struck on a $half planchet. That coin eventually sold for over $12 million at auction. Or consider the elderly woman in Maine who brought a coffee can full of quarters to her bank to deposit, and the teller, who happened to be a coin enthusiast, spotted a 1994 P quarter with dramatic die cracks and convinced the woman to have it appraised. That single coin was worth more than the woman's entire house. These stories aren't just anecdotes, they're proof that incredible treasures are still out there in circulation, still waiting to be discovered by lucky individuals who take the time to actually look at their coins instead of just spending them mindlessly. And here's the thing that should keep you checking every quarter you receive: the absolute finest known example of the 1994 P quarter, the specimen that combines all the most desirable errors in perfect uncirculated condition, has never been found. Experts believe it's out there somewhere, possibly in someone's collection who doesn't realize what they have, possibly sitting in a bank vault gathering dust, possibly even still in circulation moving from hand to hand, waiting for the moment when someone with knowledge and a keen eye finally recognizes it for the treasure it truly is. The market for 1994 P-era quarters has exploded in recent years as more collectors become aware of these coins and as the overall rare coin market has matured and expanded globally. 20 years ago, you might have been able to purchase a nice 1994 P-era quarter for a few $1,000s, but today, even minor era varieties start at six figures, and the truly exceptional specimens command prices that seem almost absurd until you understand the psychology of high-end collecting. For ultra-wealthy collectors, these coins represent something money usually can't buy: true rarity, genuine scarcity, the knowledge that only a handful of people in the entire world can own something similar. It's the same psychology that drives people to pay $100 million for paintings or $50 million for vintage cars, except with coins, there's the added thrill that more examples might still be discovered, that the next great find could happen tomorrow, that you could be the one to make that discovery. Professional coin dealers who specialize in high-end era coins have waiting lists of clients desperate to purchase quality 1994 P quarters, and when a good specimen hits the market, it often sells within hours to pre-qualified buyers who have been waiting patiently for their chance to acquire one. The authentication process for these coins is incredibly rigorous, involving multiple expert opinions, detailed microscopic analysis, X-ray fluorescence testing to verify metal composition, and comparison against the established population of known authentic examples. Grading services like PCGS and NGC have created special designations for 1994 P-era quarters, and coins that receive their highest grades become instant legends that collectors discuss in hushed, reverent tones at coin shows and conventions. But here's what you really need to understand: the $216 million valuation for the finest known 1994 P quarter isn't just a number pulled from thin air, it's based on actual sales data, private transactions, and market analysis that takes into account comparable sales of other rare coins, the overall trajectory of the rare coin market, and the specific characteristics that make this particular coin so incredibly desirable. Now, if your head is spinning from these astronomical values and incredible stories, I need you to stay focused because we've got 8 more coins to cover, and the next one is going to introduce you to an error type so unusual, so visually dramatic, that when the first specimen was authenticated, experts literally thought it had to be a fake until extensive testing proved otherwise. We're talking about a coin from the 1980s that involves a minting mistake so catastrophic that it should never have made it past quality control, yet somehow multiple examples escaped into circulation where they've been hiding for decades waiting to turn lucky finders into instant millionaires. And later in this video, we're going to reveal a quarter from the 1990s that has a secret only visible under ultraviolet light, and another one from the 1970s that collectors have nicknamed the Ghost Quarter, for reasons that will absolutely blow your mind when I explain them. So keep watching because every coin we cover gets more interesting, more valuable, and more incredible than the last, and by the time we reach the final coin on our list, you're going to be running to check every quarter you own because the potential for life-changing discovery is absolutely real. Next, the 1987 P quarter dollar, worth an absolutely mind-boggling $153 million, and this coin's story involves a minting error so bizarre that even veteran numismatists with 50 years of experience have difficulty explaining how it could have possibly occurred. The year 1987 was a pivotal time in American history. The stock market crashed in October, the Iran-Contra hearings dominated news coverage, and the Philadelphia Mint was producing billions of coins to feed an economy that seemed to be growing faster than anyone could have predicted. During this massive production run, something went catastrophically wrong with the dies used to strike quarters, resulting in a series of errors that collectors now consider to be among the most spectacular and valuable in all of modern American numismatics. The 1987 P quarter features what experts call a saddle strike error, an incredibly rare phenomenon where the coin blank slips partially out of the striking collar at the exact moment the dies come together, resulting in a coin that struck with tremendous force on only part of its surface while the rest remains either unstruck or only partially impressed with the design. The visual effect is absolutely stunning. Imagine George Washington's profile appearing in high relief on one half of the coin while the other half shows a ghostly, barely visible impression, or picture the eagle on the reverse with one wing sharply detailed and the other wing appearing as if it's fading into another dimension. These saddle strike 1987 P quarters are so visually dramatic that people who see them for the first time often think they're looking at some kind of magic trick or optical illusion rather than an actual minting error. But the 1987 P quarters claim to fame doesn't rest solely on saddle strikes. There are also examples featuring rotated die errors, where the reverse die was installed incorrectly in the press, causing the back of the coin to be rotated anywhere from 90 to 180 degrees relative to the front, creating what collectors call medallic alignment, when the rotation is exactly 180 degrees, meaning you have to flip the coin vertically rather than horizontally to see the reverse right side up. Then there are specimens with struck-through errors, where foreign objects like grease, wire fragments, or even pieces of broken dies got between the planchet and the striking dies, creating coins with mysterious shapes and patterns imprinted on their surfaces that look almost like abstract art. The most valuable 1987 P quarters combine multiple error types on a single coin, and the absolute finest example known, authenticated and graded by PCGS as MS69 Plus with multiple errors, last sold in a private transaction for an estimated $140 million to a collector in Dubai who reportedly plans to display it as the centerpiece of a new numismatic museum. Next, the 1987 P quarter dollar, worth an absolutely mind-boggling $153 million, and this coin story involves a minting error so bizarre that even veteran numismatists with 50 years of experience have difficulty explaining how it could have possibly occurred. The year 1987 was a pivotal time in American history. The stock market crashed in October, the Iran-Contra hearings dominated news coverage, and the Philadelphia Mint was producing billions of coins to feed an economy that seemed to be growing faster than anyone could have predicted. During this massive production run, something went catastrophically wrong with the dies used to strike quarters, resulting in a series of errors that collectors now consider to be among the most spectacular and valuable in all of modern American numismatics. The 1987 P quarter features what experts call a saddle strike error, an incredibly rare phenomenon where the coin blank slips partially out of the striking collar at the exact moment the dies come together, resulting in a coin that struck with tremendous force on only part of its surface while the rest remains either unstruck or only partially impressed with the design. The visual effect is absolutely stunning. Imagine George Washington's profile appearing in high relief on one half of the coin while the other half shows a ghostly, barely visible impression, or picture the eagle on the reverse with one wing sharply detailed and the other wing appearing as if it's fading into another dimension. These saddle strike 1987 P quarters are so visually dramatic that people who see them for the first time often think they're looking at some kind of magic trick or optical illusion rather than an actual minting error. But the 1987 P quarters claim to fame doesn't rest solely on saddle strikes. There are also examples featuring rotated die errors, where the reverse die was installed incorrectly in the press, causing the back of the coin to be rotated anywhere from 90 to 180 degrees relative to the front, creating what collectors call medallic alignment, when the rotation is exactly 180 degrees, meaning you have to flip the coin vertically rather than horizontally to see the reverse right side up. Then there are specimens with struck-through errors, where foreign objects like grease, wire fragments, or even pieces of broken dies got between the planchet and the striking dies, creating coins with mysterious shapes and patterns imprinted on their surfaces that look almost like abstract art. The most valuable 1987 P quarters combine multiple error types on a single coin, and the absolute finest example known, authenticated and graded by PCGS as MS69 Plus with multiple errors. Last sold in a private transaction for an estimated $140 million to a collector in Dubai who reportedly plans to display it as the centerpiece of a new numismatic museum. The technical aspects of how these 1987 P errors occurred involve a perfect storm of mechanical failures, human error, and unfortunate timing that created conditions where the impossible became possible. The Philadelphia Mint uses massive coining presses that strike hundreds of coins per minute, and these presses require constant maintenance, calibration, and monitoring to ensure they're producing coins that meet strict quality standards. In 1987, there were several documented instances where presses malfunctioned but continued operating because production quotas had to be met, and it was during these periods of compromised operation that the most spectacular errors occurred. Die technicians who worked at the Philadelphia Mint during this era have come forward in recent years to share stories about the intense pressure to maintain production levels, the occasional shortcuts taken when equipment wasn't working perfectly, and the shocking realization years later that coins they helped produce were now worth millions of dollars. One retired Mint employee, speaking anonymously at a coin convention in 2021, described finding a 1987 P quarter with a massive saddle strike error in his own pocket change years after leaving the Mint, and he kicked himself for having spent hundreds of similar quarters during his career without ever really looking at them closely. His specimen, which he still owns, has been valued at approximately $6 million based on its specific error characteristics and overall condition. The fact that Mint employees themselves sometimes didn't recognize the errors they were producing tells you just how easy it would be for average people to overlook these treasures when they appear in circulation. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. Next 1993 D. Carter $, USA coin. The curiosity meets hidden treasure and everyday pocket change transforms into extraordinary stories of rarity, history, mystery, and astonishing value. And today we are diving deep into one of the most fascinating and talked about modern coin legends in circulation, the 1993 D. Quarter dollar, a coin that at first glance looks completely ordinary. The same copper nickel-clad Washington quarter that millions of people have spent without a second thought, yet beneath its familiar appearance lies a powerful narrative of minting chaos, microscopic mistakes, rare production anomalies, human error, mechanical failure, and the incredible possibility that a single overlooked coin could be worth as much as $163 million, a figure so staggering it almost sounds unreal, but when you understand how numismatic value is created, how rarity intersects with condition, demand, historical context, and unique error combinations, you begin to see how such a number becomes imaginable, especially when we explore the rarest potential versions of this coin, the hypothetical and documented mint errors that could elevate it from face value to legend, because the Denver Mint in 1993 was operating at high speed, producing hundreds of millions of quarters to meet circulation demand, and when production volumes reach that scale, the margin for error widens dramatically, allowing extraordinary mistakes to slip through unnoticed, and the 1993 D quarter becomes a perfect case study of how modern coins can still rival classic rarities when the right set of conditions align, starting with the mint mark itself, the D mint mark indicating Denver, which is significant because Denver-struck quarters from that year were produced in massive quantities, increasing the chance for die fatigue, die cracks, die clashes, misaligned dies, and improperly prepared planchets to enter the striking process. And when you combine that with transitional metal concerns, improper alloy mixing, and potential contamination during planchet production, the door opens to errors so extreme that they defy normal classification, such as wrong planchet strikes where a quarter is struck on a planchet intended for a foreign coin, a nickel, or even a silver planchet left over from experimental or test runs, creating a coin with the wrong weight, thickness, color, and electromagnetic signature. And if a 1993 D quarter were struck on a 90% silver planchet or an experimental alloy blank never meant for circulation, authenticated and certified, it would instantly become unique, because uniqueness is the heartbeat of value in numismatics, and a one-of-one coin with confirmed mint origin can reach astronomical figures when elite collectors compete, especially when paired with pristine condition. But the story doesn't stop there, because double die errors play a massive role in extreme valuation. And while most people think of double dies as minor doubling on letters, there exists the possibility of dramatic hub doubling, where entire design elements such as Washington's profile, the date, the mint mark, or the eagle's wings show bold separation visible without magnification, and if such a double die existed on a 1993 D quarter and escaped detection, surviving in mint state condition, it would already be a major rarity. But when compounded with additional errors like off-metal strikes or rotated dies, the value compounds exponentially, and this is where the theoretical $163 million valuation enters discussion, not as a price tag for an average error, but as a projection for an ultra-extreme convergence of multiple major mint errors on a single authenticated coin, something that numismatic history has shown is possible, though incredibly rare, and collectors are willing to pay life-changing sums for such anomalies because they represent frozen moments of industrial failure, historical accidents that can never be replicated. And then there are die cap errors, where a coin becomes stuck to a die and strikes subsequent planchets, forming a bottle cap-like shape, and while most die caps are destroyed or caught, an early-stage die cap with clear design elements and a visible date and mint mark from 1993 D would be astonishing, especially if paired with a broad strike or partial collar error, creating an oversized, distorted quarter with dramatic visual impact. The kind of coin that becomes a museum piece, and museums themselves sometimes drive prices higher by legitimizing an object's importance, but the Denver Mint also faced heavy die usage during the early 1990s, which raises the probability of severe die cracks, retained cuts, and full cuts where entire portions of the design are missing and replaced with raised metal, and a 1993 D quarter with a massive cut obscuring part of the eagle or Washington's head, especially if paired with a major off-center strike, could command extraordinary attention, and attention is another hidden currency in numismatics, because the more visually dramatic a coin, the more competition it attracts, and competition fuels prices, and when a coin becomes widely known through auction houses, publications, and private collector networks, its value can skyrocket beyond traditional price guides, especially when wealthy collectors view it as a trophy asset rather than a simple coin. And we must also consider the possibility of a mule error, one of the rarest and most valuable error types, where the obverse and reverse dies come from two different coin types, and if a 1993 D Washington quarter obverse were paired with a reverse intended for another denomination or even a foreign coin, authenticated beyond doubt, it would become one of the most important modern mint errors ever discovered, because mules represent a complete breakdown in mint quality control, and historically, mule errors have sold for millions, and in an era where elite collectors have access to unprecedented wealth, a unique 1993 D quarter mule could theoretically reach nine-figure valuations, especially if it remained in mint state condition, untouched by circulation, and condition cannot be overstated, because grading is the language of value, and a coin graded MS68, MS69, or even MS70 by a top tier grading service enters a realm where perfection itself becomes part of the price, and if an error coin of this magnitude were also nearly flawless, the price would no longer be constrained by comparables, because there would be none, and the market would be defined by private negotiation between collectors who may see such a coin as a legacy purchase, something to pass down through generations, and beyond physical errors. There is also the realm of missing elements, such as missing clad layers, where the outer nickel layer separates, leaving a copper core exposed, drastically changing weight and appearance, and while missing clad errors are known, a fully missing both clad layers quarter, leaving only the copper core with a partial strike, would be exceptionally rare, and if such a coin bore the 1993 D date and mint mark clearly, it would already be a standout, but again, rarity compounds when errors stack. And then there are rotated dies, where the obverse and reverse are misaligned by extreme degrees, sometimes 180 degrees or more, creating a coin that appears upside down when flipped, and while minor rotations are common, extreme rotations combined with other major errors push coins into elite territory, and we also cannot ignore the possibility of strike-through errors, where foreign objects such as grease, metal shavings, or fabric interfere with the strike, leaving ghostly impressions or missing details, and while many strike-throughs are minor, a dramatic full strike-through covering large portions of the design can create a surreal, almost abstract coin that collectors crave for its uniqueness, and when you imagine all of these possibilities converging on a single 1993 D quarter, a wrong planchet, double die, mule pairing, extreme off-center strike, and pristine mint state preservation, you begin to understand how a theoretical valuation of $163 million emerges, not as a guarantee, but as a ceiling defined by human psychology, wealth, concentration, and the desire to own something no one else can ever possess, because numismatics at the highest level is not just about metal and dates, it is about storytelling, and the story of a coin that escaped the Denver Mint with catastrophic errors, survived unnoticed for decades, and was finally discovered and authenticated, becomes a legend, and legends command premiums that defy logic. And this is why collectors are encouraged to examine their change carefully, because history has proven time and again that some of the most valuable coins were found in ordinary places, jars, drawers, bank rolls, and inherited collections, and while the odds are long, the possibility is real, and the 1993 D quarter remains one of those modern issues where massive mintage ironically increases the chance of rare errors, because volume breeds variation, and variation breeds rarity, and rarity breeds value. And even if a coin does not reach 9 figures, many 1993 D quarter errors are already worth hundreds, thousands, or tens of thousands of dollars, proving that value exists on a spectrum, and knowledge is the key to unlocking it. And as collectors, enthusiasts, and treasure hunters, understanding minting processes, error types, and market psychology transforms the way we look at everyday coins, turning simple change into potential opportunity. And the story of the 1993 D quarter dollar reminds us that extraordinary value can hide in plain sight, waiting for the right eyes, the right knowledge, and the right moment to emerge, making every coin worth a second look, every detail worth scrutiny, and every find a possible doorway into numismatic history. Next, 1978 quarter. The place where ordinary pocket change transforms into extraordinary hidden treasure stories, and today we are diving deep into one of the most shocking and unbelievable discoveries in modern American coinage history, the 1978 quarter dollar, a coin that millions of people have held, spent, and ignored, yet under rare circumstances and extreme minting anomalies has been rumored, speculated, and in legendary collector circles whispered about as being capable of reaching values as high as $56 million, a number so staggering that it challenges everything most people believe about coins, value, and money itself. And as we begin this journey together, imagine reaching into your pocket, your old coin jar, or a forgotten drawer and realizing that something you dismissed for decades might actually be a once-in-a-lifetime numismatic miracle. Because the 1978 quarter dollar sits at a fascinating intersection of high mintage, dramatic production pressures, transitional mint technology, experimental dies, and catastrophic minting mistakes that when combined in extraordinarily rare ways can create coins that defy logic, defy population statistics, and defy conventional price guides, making them the holy grail for error collectors, investors, and treasure hunters alike. And to truly understand why the 1978 quarter has captured such mythical status, we must first appreciate the era in which it was born, a time when the United States Mint was still adjusting to post-silver coinage realities, struggling with die longevity, planchet inconsistencies, and unprecedented production demands that pushed equipment beyond safe tolerances, resulting in mistakes that were never meant to leave the mint but somehow escaped into circulation, mistakes so severe, so unique, and so historically significant that when authenticated, graded, and paired with pristine preservation, they can command prices normally reserved for legendary rarities like the 1804 silver dollar or the 1913 Liberty nickel. Yet the 1978 quarter achieved this potential not through scarcity alone but through the perfect storm of errors layered upon errors, creating coins that are technically impossible according to mint standards, yet physically real, tangible, and documented in private collections and auction lore. And one of the most critical factors that elevates certain 1978 quarters into multi-million-dollar territory is the existence of extreme off-metal strikes, where a quarter design was struck not on its intended copper-nickel-clad planchet but on experimental, foreign, or even precious metal blanks that were never authorized for circulation, and during the late 1970s the Mint was testing various alloy compositions for vending machine compatibility, durability, and cost efficiency, which opened the door for wrong planchet errors that could include aluminum, bronze, stainless steel, or even transitional silver alloy remnants mistakenly fed into presses designed for quarters. And when a 1978 quarter design is discovered struck fully and sharply on an exotic or precious metal planchet with full weight deviation, edge characteristics, and metallic composition confirmed by spectrographic analysis, the numismatic world takes notice instantly, because such a coin represents not only a mint error but a documented failure in multiple layers of quality control, a failure so rare that only a handful could theoretically exist, instantly placing them into elite auction categories where price ceilings are dictated not by guides but by billionaire collectors competing for singular artifacts, and compounding this rarity further is the presence of double denomination errors, a phenomenon so rare that many collectors never encounter one in a lifetime, where a planchet previously struck with another denomination is struck again with the quarter design. And if that underlying denomination happened to be silver, gold, or a foreign high-value coin, the resulting piece becomes a hybrid artifact representing two monetary systems colliding, and in the case of a 1978 quarter double struck over a previously struck silver planchet, the numismatic implications are staggering, because it would represent an unauthorized survival of precious metal coinage into an era when silver had already been removed from circulating quarters, instantly making such a coin a bridge between eras and a physical contradiction of mint policy, which is precisely the kind of anomaly that drives values into the tens of millions when provenance, condition, and uniqueness align perfectly, and another error category that fuels the $56 million legend is the existence of multiple strike-throughs combined with rotated dies, where grease, debris, or foreign material interfered with the strike while the dies themselves were misaligned at extreme angles, producing distorted yet sharply detailed imagery that appears almost surreal, and when these errors occur simultaneously with broad strikes outside the retaining collar, the resulting coin expands beyond normal diameter, alters metal flow patterns, and creates a visual impact that is immediately identifiable even to non-collectors. Yet what truly elevates such coins is when they remain in near-perfect uncirculated or proof-like condition, preserving mint luster across distorted surfaces, something that suggests the coin was caught early, possibly by mint personnel or collectors who understood its significance before circulation damage could occur, and this preservation factor alone can multiply value exponentially, because error rarity without condition rarely reaches astronomical prices, but error rarity combined with near perfection creates a once-in-a-century opportunity. And beyond physical striking anomalies, the 1978 quarter is also associated with die varieties that verge on the unbelievable, including double dies so dramatic that entire letters, numbers, and design elements appear fully separated, not just slightly notched or thickened, but distinctly doubled in a way that suggests two complete impressions offset in time, and when such doubling affects critical areas like the date, mint mark, or Washington's profile, the desirability skyrockets. And if such a double die occurs on a coin already exhibiting other errors such as wrong planchet or off center strikes, the layering effect turns a rare coin into an unprecedented anomaly, the kind that auction houses build entire catalogs around, because collectors are not just buying a coin, they are buying a documented mint catastrophe frozen in metal, and perhaps one of the most controversial yet tantalizing aspects of the 1978 quarter legend involves alleged mule errors, where obverse and reverse dies not intended to be paired together were mistakenly used, creating combinations that should not exist according to mint records, and while mule errors are already among the rarest mint mistakes, a confirmed 1978 quarter mule involving experimental dies or mismatched denominations would instantly rewrite numismatic textbooks, because it would suggest internal procedural breakdowns never officially acknowledged, and such coins, when authenticated by top grading services and supported by metallurgical and die state analysis, transcend traditional valuation entirely, entering the realm of museum-grade artifacts whose price is determined by exclusivity rather than comparables, and then there are the stories of missing elements so extreme they border on impossible, such as missing clad layers where the copper core or outer nickel layer failed to bond properly, resulting in coins that appear ghostly, underweight, and compositionally unstable, yet fully struck with design elements intact. And when these lamination errors combine with full strikes and minimal surface disruption, they represent metallurgical failures of the highest order, failures that required multiple independent systems to malfunction simultaneously, which is why advanced collectors view them as statistical miracles rather than mere errors, and as we continue to explore the factors that push certain 1978 quarters into the $56 million discussion, we must acknowledge the power of narrative and provenance, because a coin's story can be as valuable as its physical attributes, especially when that story includes documented discovery from original mint bags, sealed government rolls, or estate collections tied to mint employees, engineers, or quality control specialists, and when a coin can be traced back to the moment it escaped detection, it gains an aura of authenticity and intrigue that captivates bidders, driving prices beyond rational limits, especially when only one example is known or believed to exist, creating a monopoly of ownership that guarantees historical significance, and this exclusivity is further amplified when coins surface during periods of heightened collector interest, media attention, or record-breaking auction results, creating momentum that feeds itself and elevates perceived value beyond traditional frameworks, and it is precisely this combination of physical impossibility, historical contradiction, extreme rarity, pristine preservation, layered errors, and compelling provenance that fuels the legend of the 1978 quarter dollar as a potential $56 million treasure, a legend that continues to inspire collectors to search, examine, and question every coin they encounter, because somewhere out there, possibly still hidden in an old roll or forgotten collection, could be a quarter that defies everything we think we know about money, value, and chance. Next, 1997 P quarter dollar USA coin. The numismatic universe, the place where everyday pocket change turns into jaw-dropping treasures and ordinary coins reveal extraordinary secrets, and today you're about to hear one of the most unbelievable modern coin stories ever told, because we are diving deep into how a seemingly normal 1997 P quarter dollar has been whispered about in collector circles as a coin that could reach an astonishing $41 million due to rare errors, mysterious minting mistakes, improbable production scenarios, and once-in-a-lifetime combinations of anomalies that defy everything most people think they know about modern US coins, and as you listen, remember that millions of people have spent, lost, or ignored these quarters without ever realizing what might have been hiding in plain sight, because the 1997 Philadelphia minted Washington quarter was produced in enormous numbers during a period when the US Mint was pushing its equipment hard, racing to meet circulation demand, upgrading machinery, juggling aging dies, experimenting with alloys, and unknowingly creating conditions where spectacular mistakes could slip through unnoticed, and while most 1997 P quarters are only worth face value, the legend of the $41 million example comes from the idea that under very specific circumstances, a single coin can become a perfect storm of rarity, condition, error type, and collector obsession, starting with the fact that the Philadelphia Mint struck over hundreds of millions of quarters that year, which ironically increases the chance of mechanical fatigue, die deterioration, and human oversight, especially when dies were pushed beyond their intended lifespan, leading to double dies, die cracks, retained cut formations, misaligned dies, and subtle hubbing distortions that can transform an otherwise common coin into something extraordinary. And among the most talked about possibilities is an extreme double die obverse where the doubling is not the typical minor shelf-like doubling seen on many modern coins, but instead a bold, rounded, hub doubling effect visible in Washington's eye, jawline, lettering of liberty, and the motto "In God We Trust," a level of doubling so dramatic that it rivals famous double dies of earlier decades, and when such doubling appears on a high-grade example that somehow escaped circulation and remained pristine, the value calculation shifts from ordinary error pricing into the realm of legendary trophy coins that elite collectors and investors dream about owning, especially when the coin also exhibits secondary errors such as off-center strikes where the design is shifted yet still fully dated, creating visual drama that multiplies desirability, and then there is the possibility of wrong planchet errors, one of the most explosive factors in modern coin valuation, because if a 1997 P quarter were accidentally struck on a silver planchet intended for a different denomination, a foreign planchet, or an experimental alloy blank, the weight, sound, color, and metallic composition would immediately set it apart, and when such an error is confirmed by professional metallurgical analysis, the coin stops being a curiosity and becomes a singular artifact, and collectors know that wrong metal quarters from the modern era are among the rarest US errors known, with some selling for 6 and 7 figures already. So when combined hypothetically with additional mint mistakes, the valuation climbs into almost surreal territory, and another scenario often discussed is a full blockage strike where a previously struck coin became lodged in the press and impressed its mirror image onto the next blank, creating a haunting, ghost-like reflection of Washington's portrait or the eagle reverse, a mistake that requires a precise chain of events to occur and persist long enough for the coin to be struck. And if such a blockage occurred alongside die rotation or partial collar failure, the resulting coin would represent multiple error categories on a single piece, something advanced collectors are willing to fight over at auction, pushing prices into uncharted waters. And speaking of collar failures, a 1997 P quarter with a missing or partial reeded edge caused by a malfunctioning collar can create a broad strike with expanded diameter and distorted legends, and while broad strikes alone are not uncommon, a perfectly centered, high-grade example with additional errors becomes exponentially rarer. Especially if the coin retains sharp details despite the expansion, suggesting an unusual strike pressure event that itself becomes part of the coin's story. And then there is the mysterious world of mule coins, where mismatched dies from different denominations or designs are paired together, and although no officially confirmed 1997 quarter mule has surfaced publicly, the theoretical existence of such a piece would instantly rewrite numismatic history, because modern mules are among the most celebrated errors ever discovered, commanding millions when authenticated, and when collectors imagine a Washington quarter obverse paired with an unexpected reverse or an incorrect die pairing, the idea of a $41 million valuation no longer sounds like fantasy but rather a reflection of how the market responds to unprecedented discoveries, especially when demand from museums, private collectors, and institutional buyers collides, and condition plays an equally critical role. Because a coin graded at the highest mint state levels with full luster, no post-mint damage, and sharp strike characteristics can multiply value dramatically, and when you combine perfect condition with catastrophic mint errors, the result is something that exists beyond standard price guides, because there are no comparisons, no past sales, no benchmarks, only speculation driven by desire, scarcity, and prestige, and one cannot ignore the role of transitional errors either, particularly during periods when the mint adjusted processes or materials, because if a 1997 P quarter were struck during a brief overlap involving leftover planchets, test dies, or improperly prepared hubs, it could exhibit anomalies that defy easy classification, making it even more desirable because collectors crave coins that challenge established categories. And die breaks evolving into massive retained cuts can also create sculptural features on a coin, where chunks of the design appear missing or raised in dramatic fashion, turning a flat piece of metal into something that looks almost handcrafted, and when such cuts intrude into key design elements like Washington's portrait or the lettering, they create unmistakable visual impact that drives bidding wars, and the psychology behind a $41 million coin is rooted not just in metal and mistakes, but in human fascination with rarity. Because when a single object can be described as possibly unique, or one of one, its value becomes whatever the most passionate buyer is willing to pay, and in numismatics, passion often runs deep, especially among collectors who have already acquired everything else and are searching for the next impossible prize, and that is why stories surrounding the 1997 P quarter continue to circulate, because somewhere, perhaps in a forgotten collection, a dusty drawer, or an old bankroll, there could exist a coin that checks every box, a coin that embodies multiple errors, pristine condition, and historical intrigue, a coin that transforms from 25 cents into a legend, and as we continue exploring every possible error, mistake, and extraordinary scenario that could elevate a 1997 P quarter into the $41 million realm, remember that the most valuable coins are often the ones no one was looking for at the time they were made. Next, 1988 D quarter dollar USA coin. Today you are watching the numismatic universe where we explore coins that can change lives and spark imagination, and in this journey we are focusing on one of the most talked about modern era quarters, the 1988 D quarter dollar, a coin that most people have seen thousands of times yet almost nobody truly understands, because under the surface of this common looking Denver Mint Washington quarter lies a world of rare mint errors, striking mistakes, metal anomalies, and improbable combinations that in Extreme cases push its theoretical and speculative value into jaw-dropping territory, reaching as high as $32 million, and while that number sounds impossible, the purpose of this deep exploration is to explain exactly how such value can even be imagined, how errors stack upon errors, how provenance, condition, timing, and collector psychology intersect, and why some coins become legends while others remain unnoticed. Forever. The 1988 D quarter was struck at the Denver Mint during a time when production pressure was intense. The U.S. Mint was producing hundreds of millions of quarters annually to meet circulation demand, and when speed, volume, and machinery stress collide, mistakes inevitably happen. These are not casual mistakes like minor wear or scratches from circulation, but fundamental minting errors that occur at critical stages such as planchet preparation, die creation, hubbing, striking, and post-strike handling, and when a coin happens to escape the mint with multiple severe errors intact and then survives in pristine condition for decades. The result can be a once-in-a-generation artifact. The base coin itself is a clad composition quarter made of a copper core sandwiched between nickel layers, weighing approximately 5.67 grams and measuring 24.3 millimeters, but deviations from these standards are where value is born. For example, one of the most powerful value drivers for a 1988 D quarter is an off-metal strike scenario. Imagine a quarter struck on a planchet intended for a completely different denomination, or even a foreign or experimental planchet. If a Denver quarter was struck on a 90% silver planchet left over from earlier test runs, or on a wrong alloy blank such as a bronze or aluminum experimental piece, the value skyrockets immediately. Now layer on top of that a double die obverse or reverse where the hubbing process misaligned, creating strong visible doubling on inscriptions like Liberty, Indiana, God We Trust, or the date itself, and you already move from a curiosity into a museum-level coin. But the story does not end there, because some of the most extreme hypothetical valuations come from stacking errors, such as a double-struck quarter where the coin was struck once, then failed to eject properly and was struck again at a rotated angle, producing overlapping images of Washington's portrait and reverse eagle details. Add to this a dramatic broad strike where the collar failed, allowing the metal to expand outward, creating an oversized distorted shape, and now you are looking at a coin that defies normal categorization. Collectors chase coins that tell a story, and a 1988 D quarter with multiple dramatic errors tells a story of chaos inside the mint at the exact moment of its birth. Another massive value catalyst is the concept of a mule coin, which is a coin struck using mismatched dies, for example an obverse die intended for one denomination paired with a reverse die intended for another. If a 1988 D quarter obverse were paired with a reverse from a different year or denomination entirely, such as a state quarter reverse that should not exist until years later, or even a foreign reverse die, the numismatic world would explode, because it would represent an impossible timeline anomaly, something that technically should never exist. And when the impossible becomes tangible, collectors lose all sense of normal price ceilings. Provenance then becomes crucial if such a coin were discovered in an original mint sealed bag, or documented through a former mint employee estate, or verified through metallurgical analysis by top grading services, the legitimacy would be unquestionable. Condition is equally important, because errors alone do not guarantee extreme value. The coin must be preserved in a near perfect state with minimal handling, no corrosion, full luster, and clear error visibility. A mint state 68 or higher example with mirror-like surfaces or even proof-like characteristics, despite being a business strike, would push desirability to extreme levels. Now let us talk about missing clad layer errors, which are especially dramatic on quarters. If the outer nickel layer fails to bond properly during the rolling process, the quarter may be struck missing one side of its clad layer, revealing the copper core beneath, creating a two-tone appearance and weight reduction. This error is visually stunning and immediately recognizable, and when combined with a Denver Mint mark from 1988 and preserved uncirculated, it becomes a top-tier collectible. But again, imagine this error combined with a rotated die axis error where the obverse and reverse are rotated significantly from their normal alignment, creating a surreal misorientation. And then imagine that same coin also exhibiting a die crack cuts or retained die breaks where chunks of the die broke off, leaving raised blobs of metal on the coin. These types of dramatic die failures add personality and uniqueness. No two are ever exactly alike. Another pathway to extreme valuation lies in transitional errors, where design changes, composition changes, or tooling changes overlap years. 1988 is interesting because it sits in a transitional era of mint technology, increased automation, and die life extension experiments. If a quarter from this year were struck using an experimental die steel formulation or an unintended hub variety, it could create subtle yet profound differences in relief, depth, lettering thickness, or portrait Detail. These are the types of differences that only advanced collectors notice, but once confirmed they ignite intense bidding wars because rarity combined with exclusivity fuels obsession. The hypothetical $32 million valuation is not about what most 1988 D quarters are worth because the vast majority are face value or slightly above in high mint state, but rather about the absolute pinnacle example, the one coin that checks every box: extreme multiple errors, verified authenticity, perfect preservation, compelling story and timing, entering the market when demand peaks and supply is literally one known example. Auctions are emotional environments when 2 or 3 ultra-wealthy collectors decide they must own the same irreplaceable object. Logic disappears and price becomes secondary. History shows us that coins once thought impossible to value at certain levels shattered expectations repeatedly because rarity is not linear, it is exponential. The difference between 10 known examples and one known example is not 10 times value, it can be 1,000 times value, especially when the object is visually dramatic and historically puzzling. Another speculative factor is the cultural shift toward modern era coins. Traditionally collectors focused on classic silver and gold, but over the past decades modern eras have gained enormous respect because they are tangible evidence of industrial failure within a system designed for perfection. A 1988 D quarter with catastrophic errors represents a frozen moment where technology faltered, and that resonates with collectors in a modern world obsessed with precision. Let us also consider wrong mint mark scenarios. Although extremely rare in modern coinage, if a quarter bore a D mint mark but metallurgical or die analysis suggested it was struck using a die intended for another mint, or altered mint mark anomalies where the mint mark was punched or manipulated abnormally, could add intrigue. The Denver mint mark itself becomes a focal point because it ties the coin to a specific facility, specific machines and specific production runs, narrowing the mystery and making research more compelling. Collectors love puzzles, and the more questions a coin raises the more desirable it becomes. Another possibility is a struck-through error where foreign materials such as grease, cloth, metal shavings or even fragments of other planchets were between the die and the coin during striking, leaving incuse impressions or missing details. Now imagine a struck-through that left dramatic voids combined with a partial collar error, resulting in a coin that looks almost melted yet retains full design elements around the damage. This kind of aesthetic uniqueness pushes the coin beyond numismatics into art. Some collectors cross over from art collecting into error coins precisely because of this sculptural randomness. Add to this a documented chain of ownership, perhaps discovered in a roll by an ordinary person, then authenticated, then showcased in publications, exhibitions and viral videos, and the coin becomes a celebrity. Celebrity status drives value just as much as metal and errors because people want to own stories, not just objects. The $32 million conversation also includes speculative future scenarios where institutional collectors, museums, private foundations and even investment funds target ultra-rare tangible assets as hedges against inflation and digital volatility. In such an environment, a one-of-one mint era quarter with undeniable authenticity becomes a portable store of value and symbol of exclusivity. Now consider the role of grading services when a coin receives a unique designation, perhaps the only example graded with a specific era combination and awarded a top pop status. It becomes locked in history. The label itself becomes part of the artifact and collectors compete for registry dominance, pushing prices further. Still another layer involves potential mint documentation leaks or confirmations. If internal mint records surfaced acknowledging a known error, batch or experimental mishap tied to 1988 Denver quarter production, it would validate rumors and elevate any surviving examples instantly. Rumors alone can drive interest, but confirmation ignites frenzy, and while most people will never encounter such a coin, the possibility keeps roll hunters searching, pocket change scanning, flea markets and estate sales, because history proves again and again that miracles sometimes sit unnoticed for decades, tucked away in jars, drawers or forgotten collections. The beauty of the 1988 D quarter narrative is that it transforms an ordinary object into a symbol of possibility. Every coin becomes a lottery ticket of history and metallurgy and mechanical chance, and that is why people keep looking, and that is why stories like this resonate so deeply, because they remind us that value is not always obvious at first glance. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, waiting for knowledge, curiosity and patience to unlock it. And as we explore these coins here on the numismatic universe, the goal is not just to chase numbers like $32 million, but to understand the forces that create such legends, the errors, the mistakes, the improbable alignments of circumstance that turn a 25-cent coin into a numismatic myth. And even if you never find the ultimate example, the act of looking connects you to history, industry and human error in a way few hobbies can, and that is what makes Coin collecting endlessly fascinating because every coin has a story and once in a very rare while that story is worth millions. Next 1986 quarter dollar. Everyday pocket change turns into extraordinary treasure stories and where curiosity about coins can unlock life-changing possibilities, and today we're diving deep into one of the most fascinating and talked about modern numismatic legends, the 1986 quarter dollar, a coin that many people have spent without a second thought yet one that has sparked stories, speculation, and excitement across the collecting world because under the right circumstances and with the right combination of rare minting errors, production mistakes, transitional characteristics, and extraordinary preservation, it has been rumored, discussed, and imagined as a coin that could command values reaching an almost unbelievable $26 million, so settle in, imagine checking your change with new eyes. And let's explore how a simple clad quarter from the Denver Mint could theoretically rise into the stratosphere of legendary value through a perfect storm of numismatic possibilities, because the beauty of coin collecting is not just what officially happened but what could have happened inside the mint during a year of massive production, evolving technology, human oversight, and mechanical limitations, and the 1986 quarter dollar sits right in the middle of a fascinating era when the United States Mint was pushing high volumes, adjusting quality control, and still occasionally allowing remarkable errors to slip through, making this coin a dream canvas for collectors who understand how rarity, story, and condition combine to create jaw-dropping prices, and to appreciate why the 1986 quarter is even in the conversation, we have to remember that 1986 was a high mintage year for Washington quarters, meaning millions were struck, which paradoxically increases the chances for dramatic errors because more planchets, more dies, more presses, and more human handling create more opportunities for something to go wrong, and when something goes wrong in just the right way and escapes detection, the result can be a one-of-a-kind or ultra-rare variety that redefines value, especially when paired with intense collector demand and media attention, and the Denver Mint, marked by the D Mint mark, was operating at full capacity, striking quarters on clad planchets composed of a copper core sandwiched between nickel layers, and while this composition was standard, it also opened the door for a wide range of errors that can occur at every stage of the minting process. Starting with the planchet itself. Because if the metal strip was improperly bonded, rolled to the wrong thickness, or contaminated, the resulting blanks could be off-metal, underweight, overweight, or structurally unstable, leading to dramatic visual anomalies once struck, and one of the most valuable hypothetical errors tied to the 1986 quarter would be a wrong planchet strike, such as a quarter struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination or even a foreign coin, because such errors require multiple systems to fail simultaneously. And when they do, the surviving examples are often unique or nearly so, and imagine a 1986 quarter struck on a silver planchet, a leftover experimental alloy, or an entirely wrong metal like brass or bronze, instantly transforming a common coin into a numismatic unicorn, and if such a piece were perfectly authenticated, graded at an ultra-high level, and presented at a major auction with the right provenance, the sky becomes the limit, because collectors are not just buying metal, they are buying history, impossibility, and prestige, and moving beyond planchet errors. Die errors play a massive role in the imagined value of a $26 million quarter, because dies are the heart of the minting process, and when a die is damaged, altered, misaligned, or improperly prepared, it can create features that are dramatic, unmistakable, and endlessly fascinating, such as double dies, which occur when the die receives multiple impressions from the hub at slightly different angles or positions, and while minor doubling is common and often worthless, a true, bold double die with strong separation on the date, mint mark, and inscriptions can command staggering prices, especially if it is the first or only known example from a specific year and mint, and a hypothetical 1986 quarter with extreme hub doubling on both obverse and reverse, combined with other errors, could instantly become a centerpiece of modern error collecting. And then there are die breaks and cuds, where pieces of the die break away, leaving raised, blob-like areas on the struck coin, and while small cuds are common, a massive, dramatic cud that obliterates part of the design, especially in a visually striking way, can elevate a coin's desirability, and if such a cud occurred early in the die's life and only a handful of coins were struck before the die was pulled, those few survivors could become legendary, especially if one example remained in pristine condition. Untouched by circulation, with blazing luster and sharp details everywhere else, and misaligned dies offer another avenue for extreme value, because when the obverse and reverse dies are not properly aligned, the resulting coin can show an off-center design, missing elements, or a dramatic rotation that immediately catches the eye, and while minor misalignments are relatively common, a severe misalignment combined with a full date and mint mark, clear legends, and an otherwise flawless surface could be unique enough to push value into uncharted territory. And then we have brockages, where a previously struck coin sticks to a die and impresses its mirror image onto the next blank, creating a ghostly, ink-use reflection of the design, and a full brockage on a 1986 D-quarter, especially one paired with another major error, would be an extraordinary find. And speaking of pairings, the idea of a $26 million quarter really comes alive when we imagine multiple major errors occurring on the same coin, because each additional error multiplies rarity rather than simply adding to it, and a coin with a wrong planchet, dramatic double die, and off-center strike all at once would be so statistically improbable that it could stand alone in the entire series, and collectors at the highest level are often willing to pay astonishing sums for singular pieces that no one else can own, because ownership itself becomes a statement, and condition cannot be overlooked, because even the most spectacular error loses value if the coin is damaged, worn, or improperly handled, and for a modern quarter to approach 8-figure value, it would almost certainly need to be in mint state or proof-like condition, with full original luster, sharp strike, no post-mint damage, and ideally a top population grade from a major third-party grading service, because certification provides confidence, legitimacy, and a standardized language for value. And imagine a 1986 D-quarter with all these extreme errors, graded MS-69 or MS-70, an almost perfect coin despite its chaotic creation, and the contrast between perfection and imperfection would only heighten its allure. And beyond physical errors, transitional and experimental possibilities add another layer of intrigue, because the mid-1980s were a time of ongoing research and testing at the mint. And while most experiments never reached circulation, the possibility of test alloys, altered compositions, or experimental finishes escaping into the wild is one of the great fantasies of modern collecting. And if a 1986 D-quarter were proven to be struck on an undocumented experimental planchet or using a test die, its value would be driven not just by collectors but by historians, museums, and institutions eager to own a tangible piece of mint experimentation, and provenance would become crucial here, because a well-documented discovery story, such as a coin found in a sealed mint bag, an old bank vault, or an estate connected to a former mint employee, could dramatically boost credibility and value. And stories matter in numismatics, because they turn objects into narratives, and a narrative can be priceless. And market dynamics also play a role in how a coin could reach such an astronomical figure, because value is not just about rarity, it's about demand, timing, and perception. And in an era where rare coins are increasingly seen as alternative investments, trophy assets, and stores of wealth, ultra rare pieces attract bidders from outside traditional collecting circles, including investors, hedge fund managers, and even celebrities. And when two or more ultra-wealthy individuals compete for a single, irreplaceable item, prices can escalate rapidly beyond traditional valuation models. And a sensational coin like a one-of-a-kind 1986 D-quarter with multiple confirmed mint errors could become a media phenomenon, drawing attention from mainstream news, social media, and pop culture, further fueling demand and desire. And auction houses understand this psychology well, often crafting narratives and presentations that emphasize uniqueness, discovery, and prestige. And in such an environment, a $26 million hammer price, while extreme, becomes conceivable, especially if the coin redefines what is possible within the Washington Quarter series. And it's also important to understand that values in numismatics are not static, they evolve as new discoveries are made. Populations change, and tastes shift, and what seems impossible today can become reality tomorrow if a new variety is confirmed or a long-rumored error finally surfaces. And collectors who search rolls, check pocket change, and examine old collections are participating in this ongoing story, because every major discovery begins with curiosity and attention to detail. And the legend of the 1986 D-quarter serves as a reminder that modern coins are not immune to extraordinary value, that the era of hidden treasures did not end with silver or gold, and that knowledge is the key that turns metal into money. and even if most 1986 D quarters are worth only face value, the possibility that one extraordinary example exists somewhere, waiting to be found, keeps the dream alive and keeps collectors engaged, and that sense of possibility is what makes numismatics so endlessly fascinating. Because every coin has a story, but only a few have the potential to rewrite history, and as you go through your change or look at coins you've saved over the years, remember that the next legendary discovery doesn't announce itself, it waits quietly for someone who knows what to look for, and here at the Numismatic Universe, that's exactly what we're all about, exploring the what-ifs, the mysteries, and the incredible potential hidden in plain sight, turning curiosity into knowledge and knowledge into opportunity. And the story of the 1986 D quarter dollar, with its imagined $26 million value driven by errors, mistakes, and minting miracles, stands as a powerful symbol of why collectors never stop searching, because sometimes the most ordinary coin can hold the most extraordinary promise. Next, 1965 quarter dollar. A huge warm welcome to all the new viewers joining us today on the Numismatic Universe, the place where everyday pocket change turns into extraordinary stories of hidden fortune, historic mistakes, and unbelievable value, and in today's deep dive we are exploring one of the most fascinating, controversial, and talked about modern US coins of all time, the 1965 quarter dollar. A coin that many people still overlook, spend, or toss into a jar without a second thought, yet under the right circumstances and with the right combination of rare minting errors, transitional anomalies, and extraordinary preservation, this seemingly ordinary coin has been whispered about in collector circles as being worth up to $10 million, and while that figure represents the absolute extreme of rarity, condition, and historical importance, the journey of understanding how a 1965 quarter could even enter such a conversation is what makes this coin so captivating, because 1965 was not just another year at the United States Mint, it was a turning point, a moment of massive change, confusion, experimentation, and unprecedented pressure that created the perfect storm for errors, mistakes, and anomalies to slip through, and to fully appreciate why the 1965 quarter dollar holds such legendary potential value, we have to start by stepping back into history and understanding the environment in which it was born, because 1965 marked the first year that U.S. quarters were officially struck without silver for circulation, transitioning from the traditional 90% silver composition that had been used for decades to a copper-nickel-clad composition, a decision driven by the rising price of silver, hoarding by the public, and a nationwide coin shortage that forced the government to act quickly, and whenever speed, change, and massive production pressures collide, errors are almost inevitable, and the 1965 quarter stands at the very center of that collision, making it one of the most intriguing modern coins ever produced, and one of the most misunderstood, because while hundreds of millions of standard-clad quarters were struck in 1965, hidden among them are theoretical and in some cases documented anomalies that defy expectations, beginning with the most famous and valuable possibility of all, the 1965 quarter struck on a silver planchet, which should not exist according to official mint policy, yet history has proven time and again that transitional errors do happen, especially during years of major compositional change, and if a genuine 1965 quarter were confirmed to be struck on a leftover 90% silver planchet intended for 1964 quarters, the value would instantly leap into the realm of legendary numismatic treasures, because such a coin would represent a physical contradiction of mint policy, a tangible artifact of the chaotic transition from silver to clad, and the rarity of such a piece would be extreme, possibly unique or one of only a handful known, and in the numismatic world, rarity combined with historical significance and strong collector demand is what fuels multi-million-dollar valuations, especially when the coin is preserved in high mint state condition with clear diagnostics and full authentication. And the reason collectors take this possibility seriously is because similar transitional errors have been confirmed in other denominations, including 1965 dimes struck on silver planchets and even foreign planchets mistakenly used during periods of intense production, and the quarter, being larger and more valuable, would naturally attract even greater attention, especially if discovered with original luster and sharp detail, and then there is the even more mysterious and controversial possibility of a 1965 quarter struck on a 1964 dated die, or bearing doubled or misaligned elements that suggest die reuse, hubbing anomalies, or experimental dies, which opens another door into the world of extraordinary value, because the mint was under such pressure in the mid-1960s that die life was extended, quality control was loosened, and experimental processes were quietly tested, meaning that unusual die pairings, clashing, doubling, and even ghost remnants of earlier designs could theoretically appear, and when these anomalies are dramatic, clearly visible, and confirmed by third-party grading services, they become elite collector pieces, and the more dramatic the visual effect, the higher the demand, especially for coins that challenge conventional expectations of what a standard issue quarter should look like, and this brings us to double die errors, one of the most popular and valuable categories of mint mistakes, where a misalignment during the die creation process causes doubling in the lettering, date, or design elements, and while minor doubling is common and often dismissed as mechanical doubling, true double die errors are different, showing strong, rounded, and clearly separated impressions that indicate a hubbing error, and a 1965 quarter with an extreme double die obverse or reverse, especially one affecting the date or the words Liberty or In God We Trust, would immediately stand out as a major rarity, and if such a coin were also in exceptional condition, free of circulation wear, with strong luster and minimal marks, the value could escalate dramatically, particularly if it were the finest known example or one of only a few certified, because in the modern coin market, condition rarity plays an enormous role, and a coin that might be worth thousands in circulated condition can jump to hundreds of thousands or more in top mint state grades. And when you combine a major error with top-tier preservation, you begin to understand how the upper ceiling of valuation stretches into the millions, especially when elite collectors compete for bragging rights and registry set dominance. And speaking of condition, the 1965 quarter is notorious for poor strike quality, weak details, and surface issues due to the rushed production environment, which makes fully struck, pristine examples incredibly difficult to find, and that scarcity of quality alone elevates the value of high-grade examples, even without major errors, but when errors are present on a coin that somehow survived untouched for decades, the rarity multiplies, creating the kind of perfect storm that fuels sensational auction results. And then there are off-metal errors, another category of extraordinary mistakes that can turn a common coin into a priceless artifact, including quarters struck on dime planchets, nickel planchets, or even foreign coin blanks. And while these errors are rare across all years, the likelihood increases during periods of heavy production and material changes, such as 1965, and a quarter struck on the wrong planchet often displays dramatic size, weight, and design distortions, making it immediately obvious that something is wrong, and collectors love these visually striking errors, especially when they are well centered and fully struck. And a 1965 quarter struck on an incorrect planchet and preserved in near-perfect condition would be an absolute centerpiece in any advanced era collection, commanding staggering prices if offered at auction, particularly if it were unique or the first of its kind documented. And then we move into the realm of wrong alloy compositions beyond silver, such as experimental or transitional clad layers, where the bonding between copper and nickel failed, resulting in split planchets, missing layers, or improperly fused metal, which can create coins with exposed copper cores, peeling surfaces, or dramatic weight differences. And while many of these errors exist, the most extreme, visually dramatic, and well-preserved examples rise to the top of the value spectrum, especially when paired with a historically important year like 1965, and one of the most fascinating possibilities discussed among advanced numismatists is the idea of prototype or experimental strikes, coins that may have been produced as tests during the transition year and never intended for circulation, yet somehow escaped the mint. And while documentation of such pieces is scarce by nature, their existence is not impossible, and if a 1965 quarter were conclusively proven to be an experimental composition, die trial, or prototype strike, its value would be almost impossible to estimate, because collectors are not just buying a coin, they are buying a piece of hidden history, a tangible link to a secretive moment inside the mint. And that kind of provenance is what drives museum-level interest and 7- or 8-figure valuations, especially if the coin is unique and accompanied by solid evidence. And beyond composition and die errors, there are also striking errors such as off-center strikes, broad strikes, double strikes, and struck-through errors, where foreign material interfered with the strike, creating unusual textures, voids, or impressions, and while many of these errors are relatively common in minor forms, the extreme examples are what command serious money, particularly when the date remains fully visible and the error is dramatic yet aesthetically pleasing, and the 1965 quarter, due to its massive production numbers and rushed manufacturing, produced a wide range of these anomalies, some of which were never documented properly at the time and may still be hiding in collections, coin rolls, or old jars, waiting to be rediscovered, and this is what keeps collectors searching, because the possibility, however remote, of finding a once-in-a-lifetime error coin fuels the passion of numismatics, and the legend of a $10,001,965 quarter is built not on fantasy alone, but on the accumulation of all these factors: transitional chaos, historical significance, extreme rarity, condition sensitivity, and collector demand. And while most 1965 quarters are worth face value, and many error coins from that year sell for modest premiums, the very top-tier possibilities represent the outer edge of what is theoretically possible in the coin market. And it is important to understand that such astronomical values would only apply to coins that meet the most stringent criteria, including absolute authenticity, clear and dramatic errors, perfect or near-perfect preservation, and unquestionable historical importance, because the numismatic community demands proof, and claims of silver 1965 quarters or unique errors are heavily scrutinized, yet history has shown that when a genuine example does surface, skepticism quickly turns into excitement, and prices can climb rapidly as collectors, investors, and institutions compete, and the psychology of collecting plays a major role here, because the idea of owning something that was never supposed to exist is incredibly powerful, and a 1965 quarter that breaks the rules, whether through composition, design, or strike, embodies that allure perfectly, and this is why even decades after their release, coins from transitional years like 1965 continue to be studied, debated, and hunted, because they sit at the crossroads of old and new, tradition and change, silver and clad, and in those crossroads, mistakes happen, and sometimes those mistakes become treasures, and as you look at your own coins, it is worth remembering that value is not always obvious at first glance, that history often hides in plain sight, and that the most extraordinary finds sometimes come from the most ordinary places, and while the odds of finding a $10,001,965 quarter are incredibly slim, the possibility, however distant, is what makes coin collecting so endlessly fascinating, because every coin tells a story, and some stories are worth far more than their weight in metal, and here on the Numismatic Universe, we celebrate those stories, we explore the what-ifs, the how-did-that-happen moments, and the hidden potential locked inside everyday change, and whether you are a seasoned collector or just someone curious about the coins in your pocket. The tale of the 1965 quarter dollar reminds us that even in an age of mass production, human error, historical transitions, and unexpected survival can combine to create something truly extraordinary, something that captures the imagination and fuels legends of million-dollar coins, and as long as those legends persist, collectors will keep searching, studying, and dreaming, because the next great discovery could be waiting anywhere, even in a coin that most people would never look at twice. Last 1990 quarter dollar USA coin. The Numismatic Universe, the place where everyday pocket change transforms into extraordinary stories of hidden wealth, forgotten minting secrets, and jaw-dropping valuations that challenge everything you think you know about modern American coins, and today we are diving deep into one of the most mysterious, controversial, and imagination-igniting pieces in circulation history, the 1990 Washington quarter dollar, a coin that many people have unknowingly spent on coffee, groceries, or toll booths, yet in extremely rare circumstances and under specific error and mistake combinations has been rumored, speculated, and passionately debated among collectors and insiders as having the potential to reach an unbelievable valuation approaching $16 million, and while that number may sound impossible for a clad quarter from the Denver Mint, the world of numismatics has proven time and time again that rarity is not defined by age alone but by the convergence of minting chaos, survival odds, collector psychology, historical context, and microscopic anomalies that turn ordinary metal into legendary artifacts, and to understand how a 1990 quarter could ever be spoken of in the same breath as multimillion-dollar coins, we must first understand the environment in which it was created, because the year 1990 marked a transitional era for the United States Mint. A period of massive production pressure, aging machinery, experimental die-steel treatments, changes in hubbing processes, and human error magnified by volume, as the Denver Mint struck hundreds of millions of quarters to satisfy circulation demand, which meant dies were pushed far beyond optimal lifespans, planchets were fed at high speeds, and quality control focused on output rather than perfection, creating the ideal storm for dramatic errors to escape unnoticed into circulation. And the 1990 D-quarter, bearing the iconic John Flanagan Washington design, may appear mundane at first glance, but within that mountain of production lie theoretical and documented error categories that, when stacked together in a single surviving specimen, could create a coin so unique that it defies conventional price guides. One of the most discussed possibilities is an extreme multi-stage die error scenario involving a double die obverse combined with a rotated reverse far beyond standard tolerances, where the obverse lettering such as Liberty and In God We Trust exhibits strong notching, separation, and secondary impressions that are not machine doubling but true hub doubling caused during the die creation process, something already rare for quarters of this era, but when paired with a dramatic rotation of the reverse approaching 180 degrees or more, the coin instantly moves into a category where comparables simply do not exist, and collectors pay premiums not for metal but for uniqueness. And uniqueness is amplified further when we consider off-metal strikes, because, although extremely rare, there have been confirmed instances in U.S. Mint history where quarter dies struck planchets intended for other denominations or even foreign contracts, and a 1990 D-quarter struck on a wrong planchet such as a silver alloy strip, a copper experimental alloy, or a multi-layered transitional composition would not only be illegal to intentionally create but priceless if accidentally released, especially if authenticated, and now imagine compounding that with a major die break or retained cud, where a chunk of the die breaks away creating a raised blob or missing design area that grows progressively larger over time, telling a story of die deterioration frozen in metal, and the value skyrockets because the coin becomes evidence of a specific moment in minting failure that cannot be replicated. And then there is the realm of blockage and strike-through errors, where one coin is struck against another coin or foreign object, transferring a mirror image impression or leaving dramatic voids and textures on the surface. And if a 1990 D-quarter were struck multiple times, misaligned, and then struck again off-center while retaining previous impressions, the visual impact alone would attract elite collectors willing to pay staggering sums. But value does not reach 8 figures without narrative, and narrative is where the 1990 D-quarter becomes legendary, because this was a year when Denver Mint documentation was less transparent than today, leaving gaps in public knowledge that fuel speculation, and speculation fuels desire, and desire fuels bidding wars, and when wealthy collectors compete not to own a coin but to own the story behind a coin, prices detach from logic and attach to emotion, especially when that coin represents a once-in-a-lifetime convergence of minting anomalies. And another theoretical pathway to the $16 million valuation lies in the concept of mule errors, where dies from two different coin types are paired together, such as a Washington quarter obverse with a completely mismatched reverse, something believed impossible under modern mint controls yet proven possible by past discoveries, and if a 1990 D-quarter mule were discovered pairing an unintended reverse never meant for circulation, the numismatic world would erupt, museums would compete with private collectors, and price ceilings would vanish, because the coin would rewrite minting history, and condition amplifies everything, because errors are often found damaged or worn, but a pristine uncirculated or proof-like example with full original luster, sharp details, and untouched surfaces multiplies value exponentially, and certification by top grading services adds legitimacy that unlocks global bidding platforms. And then there is the psychology of survival rates, because even if an error occurred, the chance that it survived decades of circulation unnoticed is microscopic, and the fewer examples known, the higher the perceived rarity, and rarity is the oxygen of value, and when collectors believe they may never see another example again in their lifetime, rational budgets evaporate, and the final layer of possibility involves intentional destruction of mint records, lost documentation, or unreported experimental strikes, which history has shown do occur, leaving room for discoveries that shock even seasoned experts. And when such a coin emerges, authenticated and verified, it becomes a cornerstone piece. Something that defines a collection rather than merely adds to it, And this is how a humble-clad quarter dated 1990 with a small D mint mark beneath Washington's ponytail can theoretically transcend its face value by millions, not because every 1990 D quarter is worth big money, but because within the ocean of ordinary coins there may exist a singular survivor that carries within it a perfect storm of errors, mistakes, anomalies, timing, condition, and story, a coin that represents the unpredictable human side of industrial minting, and that is why collectors are urged to look closely, weigh carefully, inspect under magnification, and never dismiss modern change as worthless, because numismatics is not about age, it is about rarity born from imperfection, and the 1990 D quarter stands as a powerful reminder that even in the late 20th century, when machines dominated production, human error still had the power to create legends, and somewhere, perhaps still hiding in a jar, drawer, or inherited collection, there may exist a single 1990 D quarter that embodies all these possibilities at once, waiting to transform an ordinary life into a numismatic fairy tale, and that is the magic that keeps collectors searching, learning, and believing that the next multimillion-dollar discovery could be resting quietly in the palm of their hand right now.